Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, really. It's about how we actually get good at things,
Yeah.
how we achieve stuff.
Yeah, and the sources we're looking at today, they seem, well, almost contradictory at first glance, don't
They
they?
really do. On one hand, we've got this idea about needing um, a student mindset, always learning.
Right. Crucial. But then there's this other angle, this surprising look at passion. Maybe it's not always the answer we think it is.
Exactly. So the mission today for everyone listening is to pull out some, really practical insights from these ideas, stuff you can actually use for your own goals, your own learning, wherever you are in the process.
Definitely, because there is this tension, isn't there? We hear follow your passion all the time. It feels right.
Does.
But then there's this argument for being more measured, more of a constant learner. So digging into both should give us a clearer picture, hopefully.
Okay, let's jump into that student mindset first. The story that really grabbed me was Kirk Hammett joining Metallica.
Oh, yeah. Huge. Early 80s metal scene, getting that call. Unbelievable.
Right, you'd think, okay, I've arrived. But what does he do? Straight away, he finds a guitar teacher.
And not just any teacher. Joe Satriani, who, I mean, the sources point out, he was already known as this teacher's teacher, right? Worked with Steve Vai, guys like that.
Exactly. So Hammett lands the dream gig, but he realizes, hang on, I need to get better. Even then.
The fascinating part, reaching that peak or what looks like a peak and still thinking, nope, need more. He wasn't complacent.
And Satriani's take was interesting, too. He said Kirk was already good, shred, new chords.
But lacked the fundamentals underneath, the theory, the names for things.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't about raw talent. It was about building that deeper understanding. So it wasn't just learn more riffs. It was learn the language.
Which really shows, that this student mindset isn't just for when you're starting out. It's continuous.
Always, no matter how far you get. And his willingness to, go back to basics after landing Metallica, that says a lot.
And Satriani's lessons sound pretty intense, like really demanding.
Oh, yeah. Weekly lessons, master it or don't come back. Apparently, some other players thought he was too harsh.
But Kirk stuck with it. For 2 years.
2 years of focused study. And even after that, he kept bringing Metallica riffs to Satriani for feedback. So it wasn't just, scales and exercises. It was real-world application.
It really drives home that idea of needing humility, doesn't it? Being willing to be challenged. There's that phrase the source uses, the ego ceiling.
Right. Explain that a bit. What's the ego ceiling?
It's it's that point where you think you're good enough, right? Your ego tells you you've got this, and it stops you from seeing where you actually need to improve.
So you stop learning.
Exactly. But seeking out a teacher, a master, means admitting someone knows more, deferring to them. You just can't hack your way to real mastery,
Yeah.
And it takes that daily grind, that commitment.
That connects to the studious self-assessment idea, too. It's so easy to think we know more than we do. That pretense of knowledge.
It is. Looking at yourself objectively, seeing the weakness, that's hard, really hard. Our ego fights it.
So hard.
But the student mindset pushes you to do it. Constantly evaluate, find the gaps. And it's not just one way, right? Satriani apparently said he got better as a teacher working with Hammett.
Yeah, that reciprocity.
Yeah.
And the other framework mentioned was Frank Shamrock's plus, minus, equal.
I like that.
Oh, that's a great practical tool. Explain that one.
The idea is you need someone better than you, the plus, to learn from. Someone you can teach the minus, which reinforces your own understanding. And someone at your level, the equal, to spar with, to test yourself against.
It's brilliant because you get feedback from all angles, right? The
Yeah.
source says it helps purge ego, doubt, laziness. Just a really solid system for constant reality checks.
And it's not just fighting or music. The need for this mindset is everywhere, isn't it? Science, writing, business, sports.
Absolutely. Understanding the past of your field, the present, where it's going, you have to know the fundamentals, but stay open. So here's the thought experiment then. Put yourself in Hammett's shoes. You get the Metallica gig. What do you really do?
The temptation to think I've made it must be huge.
Totally. And how many bands from that era just disappeared?
Yeah.
That complacency, it's dangerous.
Whereas a true student is like a sponge, right?
Right.
Always absorbing, self-critical, but in a good way, motivated from within, no space for ego.
Yeah, the fighting analogy works well there. If you're not learning, finding your weak spots, your opponent, whatever that is, will find them for you.
And that applies to any goal, really. It's a fight in some sense. You need to keep improving.
It's interesting how humble many aspiring greats actually are. Being that eternal student keeps them grounded, focused on the work.
Yeah, there's that Epictetus quote. It is impossible to learn that which one thinks one already knows.
So powerful. If you think you've got it all figured out, you stop asking questions, you stop growing.
And asking for feedback, especially the tough stuff. Our ego hates that.
Oh, absolutely. It wants praise, not criticism.
But actively seeking out the harsh truth, that's how you find the blind spots. Ego also gets in the way of what the sources call incubation.
Right, those long periods of just studying, wrestling with ideas. Ego wants results now.
Yeah, it sees patience and deep work as like a waste of time. But mastery requires that slow cooking, that deep dive. And then when you do perform or produce something, ego can give you that wicked feedback, as the source calls it.
Skews your perception.
Totally. Prevents you from seeing clearly what needs fixing.
And the point about resources today is so true. We have so much access to learning. Books, courses, mentors online.
There's really no excuse not to be a lifelong student, is there? And teachers don't have to be formal instructors. They can be examples, historical figures. But ego can block access even there.
Which leads perfectly to that proverb. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's about your readiness, your openness.
Okay, so that's the student mindset. Now let's shift gears to passion, this thing we're always told to find and follow.
Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it? Live with passion. TED Talks, Burning Man, self-help. It's the cultural Kool-Aid almost.
But the counter-argument here is pretty strong. Maybe that passion, or at least certain kinds of it, can actually get in the way, hold you back.
It feels counterintuitive for sure. Like, shouldn't caring deeply be a good thing?
Well, the distinction seems key. It's not about not caring. It's about whether raw, unbridled enthusiasm is always the best driver.
The Eleanor Roosevelt example was interesting. Someone calls her passionate about social issues.
And she pushes back slightly, right? Like, yes, I supported it, but passionate isn't quite the word. She had purpose, reason, conviction, but not necessarily that fervent emotional heat.
Right. Purpose over passion, maybe?
That seems to be the core idea. And contrast that with examples where intense passion seemed to, well, lead things astray. The sources mention the conviction behind the Iraq War.
Or Christopher McCandless Into the Wild. Clearly passionate, but it ended tragically.
Robert Falcon Scott's Pole Mania, too. Just this burning desire that maybe clouded judgment. And even something like the Segway launch, huge passion, huge hype.
But it didn't match reality. And it's not just those big examples, right?
Yeah.
Think of all the failed startups, passionate founders.
Exactly. Passion was there, the hours were put in, but maybe without the right plan, the adaptability, the realism.
So the argument isn't don't care. It's beware of just enthusiasm. Impulsive action driven by vague goals.
Precisely. Think about John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar called his style dispassionate.
Not fiery speeches.
Nope. Control, process, doing your job. Not being a passion slave, as he put it. Focus on the system.
And look at the results. Roosevelt's legacy, Wooden's championships. It suggests that measured, purposeful approach works. It's about the long game, accumulation over time.
Because complex problems, big goals, they need clarity, right? Deliberation, method, not just a flash of passionate inspiration.
There's that pattern described.
Yeah.
Passion leads to hearing what you want, doing what feels good in the moment.
And despite working hard, not actually achieving much.
Yeah.
Busy, but not effective.
It's a sobering thought that failures are often just as passionate as successes. Segway, Iraq, McCandless, Scott, Napoleon invading Russia even. Passionate endeavors, disastrous results.
Yeah, we only see the outcome in retrospect. Passion alone clearly isn't enough. It can even, the sources suggest, mask weaknesses.
How so?
Well, that frantic energy can feel like progress, right? But it might just be papering over a lack of real discipline or skill mastery or a clear purpose or just perseverance when things get tough.
The passion paradox. Busy doing nothing of substance.
Yeah. And the comparison to mental retardation, I mean, it's strong language.
Very provocative.
But it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Does unchecked passion blunt critical thinking, like a dog chasing its tail, lots of energy, no direction?
So what's the alternative then, if not just passion?
Purpose and realism, that seems to be the key combination.
Okay, break those down. Purpose is.
Passion with boundaries, focused on something beyond just yourself. A 2 and a 4, as the source puts it.
Got it. And realism.
That's about having perspective, detachment, knowing where you're starting, planning the first steps, checking if you're actually moving forward, benchmarking, not getting lost in the dream.
That youthful intensity can lead to burnout too, right? Impatience, purpose feels more sustainable.
Definitely. And realism keeps you grounded. Asking, okay, where do we actually start? What's step one? How do we measure this? Practical stuff.
There's that Goethe quote, too. Great passions are maladies without hope.
Wow.
Suggests it can be almost destructive if it's all-consuming.
Yeah. And then the description of the purposeful person, hiring experts, asking hard questions, planning for problems, starting small, getting feedback, leveraging wins.
It's iterative, step by step.
Hmm.
Less glamorous than the all-in bet-the-farm passion approach, maybe.
But probably way more effective in the long run. That iterative process lets you learn, adjust, build momentum. The all-in passion play is super risky.
So the final takeaway on this point is that important work needs deliberation, consideration, even being a bit intimidated by the challenge, not just blind enthusiasm.
Exactly. Which leads to that great Talleyrand quote for diplomats. Above all, not too much zeal. Maybe that applies more broadly. A bit of strategic restraint.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've explored these two uh, really powerful themes, seemingly opposed at first,
Right. The absolute need for that humble, continuous student mindset.
and the potential pitfalls of relying only on that raw, unchecked passion.
And it feels like the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, doesn't it? Combining that humility to learn with a clear sense of purpose and a dose of realism.
Yeah, channeling the energy effectively. Not just enthusiasm for enthusiasm's sake, but directed effort, constant self-check-ins, dedication to actually improving.
So, the final thought for listeners to chew on, where in your life are you maybe running purely on passion right now? Or where do you feel like you've kind of arrived and stopped learning?
Good question. How might applying these ideas, being more of a student, focusing more on purpose and realism, how might that change things? Your approach, your results.
Definitely something worth reflecting on. How that shift in mindset could lead to, well, maybe more sustainable and fulfilling progress.